My name is Lauren, and I am delighted to welcome you to IMPROVATE's first International Innovation Forum. Joining us, though, are speakers from 13 countries and representatives from over 20 countries. Among them, world leaders, opinion shapers, medical and security experts, investors, and technology executives.
IMPROVATE derives from two words, improvement and innovation. And about a year and a half ago, we realized that there is an opportunity to create a platform that puts the money where the mouth is. And this platform hopefully will enable all of you to create business and strategic collaborations that will make the world better for everyone.
The talent is by far some of the most talented people here in this region. Silicon Valley wouldn't be Silicon Valley if it wasn't for, the innovative minds and the spark, the small community that's happening here in Tel Aviv.
I'm so proud to be with you, to be one of you, and all of us coming here together, being members of the IMPROVATE family. A family of joint values. A family that has a very special ambition and a goal to serve.
Since he left office as Prime Minister of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, he has dedicated much of his life to helping Africa overcome its challenges and making globalization accessible to developing countries through the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. Please welcome the Right Honorable Tony Blair. Thank you so much for joining us today, sir. Okay, welcome once again, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much.
It's really too bad you couldn't be here in person, but we're really happy to have you anyway.
Yeah, and I'm so sorry. I mean, good afternoon, everyone. And I'm absolutely delighted to participate again at the IMPROVATE conference. I'm really sorry I'm not there in person, but, this is the world of COVID.
Yeah, that's the situation. So I'd like to start by asking you, what are the biggest challenges humanity is facing, and what role does Israel have in solving some of those challenges?
Okay, so you can draw up obviously quite a long list of challenges. There's the climate change issue. We're still dealing with COVID and future pandemics, issues to do with extremism and failed states. I think inequality between the developing and the developed world is a major, major question. And the answer to what Israel can do is help by innovation and example. And one of the things that's really important, and one of the things my institute has been working on these past years, is how do we take the best technology in the world and allow countries to develop so that we reduce those inequalities? And how do we take technology and use it for the purpose of dealing with climate change? It's even got applications in respect of extremism, because one part of the program my institute has is to bring people using technology from different cultures and faiths together. So, this is a world where we have these problems, but we also have the potential solutions in our hands. And by the way, I was just listening to the presentation on the bioprinting, and reflect. I hope that develops fast, because I could do with a bit of that.
Yeah, we're seeing lots of really amazing technology today at the conference. So for the last couple of years, you've been advocating the vision that the gap between quality of life and services between developing and modern countries could be significantly reduced by making technological innovation accessible. As we all know, Israeli companies are at the forefront of technological revolution, as we're seeing here today. Now, how do you see IMPROVATE's role in executing that vision that we're speaking about?
Well, the important thing that IMPROVATE can do is it can provide a platform, as it's doing today, and it can do facilitation. Because many of the technologies that you've been looking at today are technologies that, of course, they've got an application in the developed world, but they also could help the developing world accelerate its development. So the program that my institute has around technology and development is called Tech for Development. And essentially, if you take healthcare, there is no need for a developing country today to build the legacy system that the West has, because the systems that the West has at the moment are outdated. So you could use technology in order, for example, to develop an electronic patient record for patients, You could do remote counseling. You could have a situation where you are developing the adult vaccines and getting vaccines into people in those developing countries. If you take education, there's no reason for developing countries to go and build the bricks and mortar legacy systems again of the West. They could do so much more through the use of technology, financial payments. For example, being able to transport material out to remote areas through the use of drones. There's a whole plethora of technology, innovation, and application that would be absolutely transformative for these countries. And whenever we're involved in this ourselves as an institute, and we bring technology, including technology from Israel, into developing countries, you see their ability to leapfrog the development processes of the more developed countries. And this is what's really exciting. But the biggest problem is always explaining to those countries and their leadership, their political leadership, this is what is possible, and this is how you can be helped to utilize this technology. One other thing that's really important, that's where IMPROVATE obviously has a role, but the other thing that's important is to realize for a lot of these countries, their appetite for this technology is very big. So if you are a technology company in Israel, you're likely to get a much easier place in many ways to test and to explore the possibilities in practice of your technology working. Because a lot of these countries, many of the presidents that I work with across Africa are really anxious to bring this technology in, and they're prepared to put in place a very good regulatory environment in order to encourage it.
So with that said, how do you get government and technology companies, the change makers and the decision makers, together to create a dialogue to understand opportunities and challenges, and how can platforms like IMPROVATE contribute to this dialogue?
They can contribute just by bringing the people together. I mean, the toughest thing for technology, and I know this as someone who left office some time ago, when the technology revolution was beginning, but it wasn't as pervasive and deep-reaching as it is now. The single toughest thing for people in government policymakers is a lack of understanding of what the technology can do. And in the end, technology is going to change everything, right? I keep saying to people in office today, you've got to understand this is the 21st century equivalent of the 19th century industrial revolution. So literally everything is going to get disrupted and changed. And it also means government and the way it operates, the way the state works, should also be disrupted and changed. And that's a tough message to give policymakers, but they're increasingly open to it. The gap is the understanding, is actually knowing what can be done, is knowing, for example, in your healthcare system, that if you have the data and the capability of accumulating that data, it's going to allow you to run your healthcare system much better and more substantively. So, for example, in COVID, we've been helping countries register their vaccinations on a proper database so that the vaccinations can be authenticated. And that is the only way they're going to be able to get out and to travel again and to be able to show to people that the vaccination process is actually working and to keep track of it. So the most important thing, and this is where platforms like IMPROVATE can help, is getting those policymakers to understand what is possible and to understand how they might apply it.
So, sir, you do a lot of work in developing countries. What can these countries learn from Israel's experience in creating a successful agriculture sector despite having an arid climate and water shortages? And again, how can private sector companies such as IMPROVATE help facilitate change in the developing world?
Well, this is perhaps the best example of just making sure that people know what is available. And my institute over the past few years has actually facilitated quite a number of Israeli companies going into Africa with various aspects of agri-tech. I mean, of course, best known is obviously water management, drip irrigation, and so on. But there's a whole series of ways in which technology can be used. It can be used in order to help people get their produce to market. It can be used, obviously, in order to increase production. It can be used in many, many different ways so that groups of small farmers can come together and develop their produce much more effectively. And of course, it can be used for things like where they're receiving payments from government. If you have proper authentication, then they can receive those without the problems of corruption that often, unfortunately, come into these types of systems. So that there's a huge amount that Israel can teach those developing countries in terms of agri-tech. And again, that's one area where if there are people here at the conference today that have got ideas that they believe can make a real difference to those developing countries, to agricultural production, they should be in touch through IMPROVATE. And I'm sure we can introduce them to people in government, in countries in which they'll be delighted to try and utilize the technology.
So let's move on to sort of more regional issues. I want to talk to you about the Abraham Accords. Now, the Abraham Accords may have created a brighter economic future for the Middle East, but some might say they skipped over the Palestinian conflict. Do you think we've missed the boat on the Palestinians? And do you expect more Arab countries to join those Abraham Accords? What's your view on that?
Well, as some people may know, for many years I've said that the absolute key to the region, actually, but also for the Palestinian issue, is that the state of Israel and the Arab nations come together in a good relationship. Because otherwise, I don't think there will either be stability in the region or actually hope for the Palestinians. And so I played a part in the Abraham Accords and the original putting together of leaders in the UAE and in Israel. And I think, it's the important thing about those accords is that they represent a warm peace. It's not simply the absence of conflict. It's the desire for actual peace. And the importance of that is that I don't believe there will ever be a resolution of the Palestinian issue or the broader Arab-Israeli conflict, as it at least used to be called, unless there's a genuine cultural understanding and harmony. And that's why it's important that this peace is not just about the absence of conflict. It's also about coming together economically, politically, socially. I mean, you saw the other day in the idea of the project for renewable energy and water that brought together Jordan, the UAE, Israel. These initiatives are an important part of creating a new and different and modern Middle East, where people, whatever their faith and their culture, work together. Because I've said this over many, many years, but the only way forward for the Middle East is what I call open-minded, tolerant societies and rule-based economies. So where Israel sits in the region is and always has been, and the attitudes to Israel, an important part of creating that modern vision. So, I'm very supportive of it. I hope in time other countries join in. And I think it does offer a very, very important way forward and some hope.
Well, speaking of a way forward, we have a new administration in Washington. And of course, here in Israel, we have a new sort of complex coalition. Does this give you optimism about reaching some kind of a solution or perhaps an end to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
Yeah, I have a slightly unconventional take on this, having worked on it for many, many years. You see, I think for a long time, the international community, successive American administrations, everyone worked on the basis that if you only got people sat round the table and you made them negotiate long enough, you would produce a solution. And I think that is to look at it the wrong way around. And I partly draw on the experience we had in creating the Northern Ireland peace process, is that in the end, any peace agreement comes out of a changed situation. I mean, it can help change the situation, but you have to start with the basic elements that are necessary. And I think those elements today are really around the politics of the situation. I think there are big changes necessary in Palestinian politics. We need, obviously, the revival of hope in Israel that it really is possible to have peace with the Palestinians. And I think that hope has been dented over the past years. And we need the international community to be realistic about what is necessary to get that peace. And one of the reasons I came finally to believe that establishing good relations between the Arabs and the Israelis, contrary to the conventional wisdom, was key to getting a just and fair deal for Palestinians, is because in the end, it's only if you have a changed context in which people want to live in peace with each other and want to put the enmities of the past aside and have that cultural tolerance and openness, it's only then that you're ever going to get an agreement that works. And so that's what I think has to happen. I mean, I think in a way, almost irrespective of who's the government in Israel, who's the government in the United States, until you get that coming together, and for people to realize that ultimately, the only way of reviving anything that remotely approaching a two-state solution is if you have that basic desire for peace that is expressed not just in political, but in cultural terms.
Tony Blair, thank you very much for joining us today. It was really a pleasure.
Thanks very much, Lauren. Thank you, everyone. Great to be with you.
And that is it for IMPROVATE's Jerusalem 2021 International Innovation Forum. The forum is just the first step in creating collaborations between governments, businesses, and investors, and leading Israeli technology companies that were here today. The exposure right here at this conference is a first step. The next step, delegations and real-world business connections to promote IMPROVATE's vision of making technology accessible to all and improving the lives of people across the world. I would like to thank all of the wonderful speakers and panelists, the companies who presented the best of Israeli technologies, and all of you, of course, who were here with us today. A special thanks to two amazing women who made today's event possible, IMPROVATE's founder, Irina Nevzlin, and Ronit Hassin-Hochman, who together prove that nothing stands in the way of will. Thank you both so much for putting on today's important gathering. Happy Hanukkah, and we will see you guys at the concert tonight. Thank you.